An immigrant nurse is hired to care for a disabled millionaire. She did many tasks, including changing his diapers. Everyone laughed at her for leaving her homeland for this. But his wife was about to do something that would make everyone break. Out in a cold sweat. Before you listen, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The roar of the motorcycle echoed through the imposing gates of the Whitaker mansion, breaking the silence of the sunny morning in New York. Emily Thompson, 28 years old, freshly graduated in nursing, turned off the engine and removed her helmet, revealing a determined face and eyes that shone with a mix of anxiety and hope. She adjusted her impeccable white lab coat over her simple clothes and checked once more the small backpack where she carried her essential belongings. At that moment, Emily wasn't just a nurse starting a new job. She was a Portuguese immigrant who had left everything behind in search of a better life in the United States. With steady steps, she approached the intercom and announced her arrival. The metallic voice that responded sounded cold and distant, contrasting with the warm reception Emily had hoped for on her first day of work. "Come in," was the only word she heard before the gates automatically opened. Emily walked along the polished stone path that wound through a meticulously cared-for garden. Roses of every color, rare orchids and century-old trees created a scene worthy of a fairy tale. But the young nurse had no time to admire the landscape. Her focus was on the imposing structure ahead, a mansion that blended classical and modern, elements with large glass windows reflecting the blue sky. Before she could ring the doorbell, the main door opened. A middle-aged woman dressed in an impeccable housekeeper's uniform greeted her with an assessing look. "Miss Thompson, I presume," she said, her neutral tone revealing neither approval nor disapproval. "I am Mrs. Eugenia, the housekeeper. Please follow me." Emily nodded, swallowing hard. The interior of the mansion was even more impressive than the exterior. Artwork she recognized as being by famous masters adorned the walls, and the furniture seemed to have come straight out of a design museum. As she followed Mrs. Eugenia through the silent hallways, Emily felt the weight of the responsibility she had taken on. She wasn't there just to care for an ordinary patient. Her new employer was none other than Anthony Whitaker, one of the wealthiest and most influential men in the United States. "Mr. Whitaker suffered a stroke 6 months ago," Mrs. Eugenia explained as they climbed a marble staircase. "Since then, he has remained in a vegetative state. The doctors, well, they aren't very optimistic." Emily nodded, absorbing the information. She knew cases like this were challenging, but she was determined to make a difference. "Mrs. Whitaker hired you on Dr. Mendez's recommendation," the housekeeper continued. "He was impressed with your work at the University Hospital in Lisbon. I hope you're up to the expectations." Finally, they reached a large, carved wooden door. Mrs. Eugenia stopped, her hand on the doorknob. "Miss Thompson," she said, her tone softening for the first time, "I must warn you, Mr. Whitaker's situation is delicate. The family is going through a difficult time. Discretion and professionalism are essential." Emily nodded, feeling her heart race. "I understand, Mrs. Eugenia. I'll do my best." With one last assessing look, the housekeeper opened the door. The room was spacious and luxurious, but Emily barely noticed the details. Her eyes were immediately drawn to the motionless figure on the king-size bed. Anthony Whitaker, once a titan of business, now seemed small and fragile among the silk sheets. State-of-the-art medical equipment surrounded the bed, their beeps and hums breaking the oppressive silence. Emily approached slowly, her trained eyes quickly assessing the situation. What she saw deeply shocked her. Despite all the luxury around, it was evident that the patient's basic care was being neglected. The unshaven beard, greasy hair, and unmistakable smell of poor hygiene were clear signs that something was very wrong. "My God," murmured Emily, unable to contain her reaction. Mrs. Eugenia cleared her throat, seeming uncomfortable. "The previous nurse, and well, she didn't adapt to the demands of the job. We had to let her go a week ago." Emily took a deep breath, feeling a mix of indignation and determination growing within her. "I understand. Can I start immediately?" Before the housekeeper could respond, a cold, sharp voice filled the room. "So this is the new nurse?" Emily turned to see an elegant woman standing in the doorway. Impeccably dressed in a designer outfit, with expensive jewelry adorning her neck and wrists, she exuded an aura of wealth and power. But it was her eyes that caught Emily's attention, cold and calculating, without a trace of emotion, as she looked at the man in the bed. "Mrs. Whittaker," Mrs. Eugenia gave a slight bow. "This is Emily Thompson, the nurse recommended by Dr. Mendes." Victoria Whittaker, the millionaire's wife, scrutinized Emily from head to toe with a critical gaze. "I hope you're more competent than the last one. I can't stand the smell of diapers any longer." Emily felt her face flush with a mix of indignation and shame on behalf of the patient. "Ma'am, I assure you I will do everything in my power to ensure Mr. Whittaker's comfort and dignity." Victoria shrugged, her disinterest palpable. "Whatever, just make sure he's presentable. I don't want visitors to see this." She made a vague gesture toward the bed. With those words, she turned to leave but stopped at the door. "Oh, and keep the costs under control. This situation is already costing us a fortune." When the door closed behind Victoria, a heavy silence fell over the room. Emily looked at Mrs. Eugenia, who seemed embarrassed. "Well," said the housekeeper, trying to regain her composure, "I suppose you have work to do, Miss Thompson. If you need anything, I'll be downstairs." Alone in the room with her patient, Emily felt the full weight of the task ahead. It wasn't just a matter of medical care. It was a battle for a human being's dignity. She approached the bed, looking at the still face of Anthony Whittaker. Despite the lack of response, she spoke softly. "Mr. Whittaker, my name is Emily. I'm here to take care of you. I promise I'll do my best to help you." With those words, she got to work. First, she organized the supplies and equipment needed for a bed bath. As she prepared everything, her mind worked on a comprehensive care plan. The next few hours were intense and meticulous work. Emily washed, cleaned, and cared for every inch of Mr. Whittaker's body with gentleness and respect. She spoke to him constantly, explaining each procedure as if he could understand everything. When she finally finished, the room had a completely different atmosphere. The smell of cleanliness replaced the unpleasant odor, and Mr. Whittaker looked more comfortable and dignified in his freshly made bed. Emily sat down for a moment, exhausted but satisfied. She looked at her patient and smiled softly. "All done. Mr. Whittaker, I hope you're feeling better now." It was then that something unexpected happened. For a brief moment, Emily could have sworn she saw Mr. Whittaker's fingers twitch slightly. She blinked, unsure if she had imagined it, but decided to take it as a sign of hope. At that moment, Emily made a silent promise to herself and to her patient. She would not only care for his body, but would do everything in her power to bring back the soul of the man trapped in that motionless body. The sun was beginning to set when Emily finally left the room for a well-deserved break. As she walked down the hallway, her mind was already planning the next steps. She knew she would face challenges, Mrs. Whittaker's indifference, medical limitations, perhaps even the disbelief of others. But Emily Thompson was not a woman who gave up easily. She had come to the United States in search of a new life and a chance to make a difference. Now, in this imposing mansion, caring for a man the world seemed to have forgotten, she had found her mission. With renewed determination, she descended the stairs, ready to face whatever came next. The first day had ended, but the real journey was just beginning. The sun had barely risen when Emily arrived at the Whittaker mansion the next morning. Her body still ached from the intense work of the previous day, but her determination remained unshaken. She parked her motorcycle and, adjusting her lab coat, entered the property with firm steps. Mrs. Eugenia greeted her at the door, her face a mask of professional neutrality. "Good morning, Miss Thompson. Breakfast is served in the kitchen in case you'd like something to eat before starting." Emily nodded, grateful. "Thank you, Mrs. Eugenia. I'll just have a quick coffee if you don't mind." In the spacious, modern kitchen, Emily found a young woman preparing what seemed to be the family's breakfast. The girl, who introduced herself as Marion, the kitchen assistant, offered her a cup of strong coffee and a still warm cheese bread. "How was the first day?" Marion asked, her curiosity evident. "It's been a while since we've seen a nurse last." "More than a few weeks here," Emily took a sip of her coffee, thoughtful. It was challenging, but I'm determined to do my best for Mr. Whitaker. Marion lowered her voice, looking around as if afraid of being overheard. You know, things weren't always like this. Mr. Anthony, he was different before the accident. Generous, you know? He always had a kind word for all of us. Before they could continue the conversation, the sound of high heels echoed down the hallway. Victoria Whitaker entered the kitchen, her imposing presence making Marion shrink and quickly return to her work. "Ah, you're here early," said Victoria, her tone as cold as ever. "Good. We have guests for dinner tonight, and I don't want any unpleasant incidents. Make sure Anthony is presentable." Emily swallowed the sharp retort that threatened to escape. Instead, she maintained a professional tone. "Of course, Mrs. Whitaker. I will do everything possible to ensure Mr. Anthony's comfort." With a dismissive wave, Victoria poured herself a cup of coffee and left, leaving behind a tense silence. Finishing her coffee quickly, Emily thanked Marion and headed to Anthony's room. As she entered, she was greeted by the rhythmic sound of medical equipment. Mr. Whitaker was just as she had left him the night before, motionless in his bed. "Good morning, Mr. Whitaker," she said softly, approaching him. "I hope you had a good night. Let's start our day, shall we?" Emily began her morning care routine, speaking constantly to her patient. She firmly believed that even in a vegetative state, Anthony could somehow hear and feel her presence. As she worked, Emily noticed a photograph on the nightstand. Showed a younger Anthony, smiling broadly next to a majestic horse. His eyes sparkled in a way that painfully contrasted with his current condition. "You like horses, don't you?" she asked, holding the photo up for him to see. "It must be wonderful to ride. You know, in Portugal we have a breed of horses called Lusitano. They are beautiful and noble animals." For a moment, Emily thought she saw a slight movement in Anthony's eyes, but she convinced herself it was just her imagination. Throughout the day, she dedicated herself not only to his physical care, but also to mentally stimulating her patient. She read excerpts from newspapers, described the weather outside, and even hummed a few soft Portuguese songs. In the afternoon, while adjusting the IV, Emily heard raised voices coming from the hallway. She immediately recognized Victoria's cold tone. "We can't go on like this, doctor. How much longer do we have to endure this situation?" The male voice that responded was calm but firm. "Mrs. Whitaker, I understand your frustration, but we must be patient. Mr. Anthony's condition is delicate but not irreversible." "Patient? It's been 6 months. Our resources aren't infinite, doctor." Emily felt her stomach churn at the coldness in Victoria's words. How could someone speak like that about their own husband? The door opened, and a middle-aged man in a white lab coat entered, followed by Victoria. He introduced himself as Dr. Mendez, the neurologist in charge of Anthony's case. "Ah, you must be Miss Thompson," he said, extending his hand. "I've heard excellent things about your work in Lisbon." Emily greeted the doctor, grateful for his presence. As Dr. Mendez examined Anthony, she watched intently, eager to learn more about her patient's condition. "Has there been any change in recent days?" the doctor asked. Emily hesitated, thinking about the slight movement she thought she had seen. "I'm not sure, doctor. Sometimes I think I see small reactions, but—" "Your imagination, Victoria," interrupted impatiently. "Doctor, how much longer do we have to keep up this intensive care? Wouldn't it be better to consider other options?" Dr. Mendez furrowed his brow. "Mrs. Whitaker, we've already discussed this. Mr. Anthony still has a chance of recovery. Abandoning treatment now would be premature and unethical." Victoria huffed but didn't press further. With one last cold glance at her husband, she left the room, leaving behind a heavy silence. The doctor sighed, turning his attention to Emily. "Miss Thompson, don't be discouraged. Your dedication could make all the difference. Keep stimulating him, talking to him. The human mind is a mystery, and we never know when a connection might be re-established." After a few more instructions and a detailed examination, Dr. Mendez said his goodbyes, leaving Emily alone with her thoughts and her patient. She sat by the bed, gently holding Anthony's hand. "Mr. Whitaker, I don't know if you can hear me, but I want you to know. I won't give up on you. We'll fight this together, okay? The hours passed and night fell over the mansion. Emily could hear the chatter of guests arriving for dinner downstairs. She focused on keeping Anthony comfortable and presentable as Victoria had demanded. When her shift finally ended, it was past midnight. Exhausted but satisfied with her work, Emily was preparing to leave when she noticed something strange. A small shiny object had fallen behind the nightstand. Curious, she bent down to pick it up. It was an old ornate key with an engraved crest she didn't recognize. She looked around, trying to figure out where it might have come from, but saw nothing that matched. For a moment, Emily considered handing the key over to Mrs. Eugenia, but something made her hesitate. There was a mystery here, she could feel it. Deciding to trust her instincts, she slipped the key into her lab coat pocket. "Good night, Mr. Whitaker," she whispered, adjusting the blankets one last time. "Tomorrow will be a new day, full of possibilities." As she left the mansion, mounting her motorcycle, Emily couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious key and what it might mean. She had a feeling she was only scratching the surface of something much larger. With the night breeze of New York on her face, she sped toward her small apartment, her mind filled with questions and possibilities. The second day had ended, but the true story of Anthony Whitaker, she suspected, was only beginning to unfold. Dawn brought with it a light rain that enveloped the Whitaker mansion in a melancholic mist. Emily arrived earlier than usual, the mysterious key weighing heavily in her pocket and on her conscience. She had spent much of the night awake, turning the object over in her fingers, imagining its origin and meaning. As she entered the property, Emily noticed an unusual commotion. Staff were rushing back and forth, and there was a palpable tension in the air. Mrs. Eugenia intercepted her in the entrance hall, her usually impassive face now marked by lines of worry. "Miss Thompson, I'm glad you're here. We have a delicate situation on our hands." Emily frowned, concerned. "What happened? Is Mr. Whitaker okay?" The housekeeper hesitated for a moment before responding. "Mr. Whitaker is stable, but, well, it's better if you see for yourself. Please follow me." Intrigued and apprehensive, Emily followed Mrs. Eugenia through the halls of the mansion until they reached Anthony's room. As they opened the door, the scene unfolding before them was, to say the least, surprising. Victoria Whitaker stood by her husband's bedside, her face a mask of contained fury. In front of her, firmly holding Anthony's hand, was a young woman Emily didn't recognize. The girl, who couldn't have been more than 20-something, had red, swollen eyes from crying. "I already told you to leave," Victoria hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You have no right to be here." The young woman lifted her chin defiantly, despite the tears. "He's my father. I have every right to be by his side." Emily felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. Father? Anthony Whitaker had a daughter. How had this never been mentioned before? Victoria turned to Emily and Mrs. Eugenia, her eyes blazing with anger. "Get this intruder out of here immediately." Before anyone could react, the young woman stood up, facing Victoria. "You can throw me out now, but you can't keep me away forever. I'll fight for my right to see my father, even if I have to take it to court." With those words, she stormed out of the room, brushing past Emily in the process. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Emily saw a mix of pain, determination, and pleading in those young eyes. As soon as the door closed, behind the girl, Victoria turned to the two remaining women, her voice sharp as a blade. "This didn't happen, do you understand? If I find out either of you mentioned this unwelcome visit to anyone, the consequences will be severe." With one last warning glance, Victoria left the room, leaving a heavy silence behind. Emily looked at Mrs. Eugenia, searching for some explanation, but the housekeeper simply shook her head, indicating that this was neither the time nor the place for questions. Alone with Anthony, Emily approached the bed, carefully observing her patient. Was she imagining it, or was there a different tension in his facial muscles? "Mr. Whitaker," she said softly, "I don't know what's happening here, but I promise I'll take care of you to the best of my ability." The day passed in a state of strange normality after the morning's turmoil. Emily devoted herself to her duties with even more diligence, as if she could somehow compensate for the stress her patient might be feeling. That afternoon, While performing passive exercises on Anthony's limbs, Emily couldn't help but think about the young woman who claimed to be his daughter. There was an undeniable resemblance in their facial features now that she paid attention. How had this part of Anthony's life been kept a secret, and why? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. It was Dr. Mendez, arriving for his weekly visit. "Good afternoon, Miss Thompson," he greeted with a tired smile. "How are things here?" Emily hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Opting for discretion, she replied vaguely, "It's been an interesting morning, Doctor." The doctor raised an eyebrow but didn't press the matter. Instead, he focused on examining Anthony, occasionally asking Emily questions about his routine and any changes she might have noticed. As Dr. Mendez worked, Emily gathered the courage to ask a question that had been bothering her. "Doctor, in your experience, can patients in a vegetative state emotionally react to events around them, even if they can't physically show it?" The doctor paused, looking at her with renewed interest. "That's an excellent question, Miss Thompson. The truth is, there's still much we don't know about consciousness in altered states like this one. Some studies suggest that patients in a vegetative state may indeed have internal emotional responses, even if they can't express them externally. Why do you ask? Did you notice something?" Emily bit her lip, thoughtful. "I'm not sure. Sometimes I feel like I see small changes in Mr. Whitaker's facial expressions, especially during moments of tension in the environment." Dr. Mendez nodded, pensive. "Keep observing closely, Miss Thompson. Your instincts as a nurse are valuable. And remember, the human mind is a fascinating mystery. Never underestimate the power of emotional connection, even in cases like this." After the doctor left, Emily found herself alone again with Anthony and her swirling thoughts. The key in her pocket seemed to weigh a ton, constantly reminding her that there were more mysteries in this house than she had initially imagined. Determined to do something productive with her restlessness, Emily began to gently search the room, looking for any clues that could help her better understand her patient's life. It was then that her eyes landed on a bookshelf in the corner of the room. Approaching it, she noticed one volume in particular that seemed out of place, an old leather-bound photo album. Carefully, Emily took it off the shelf and opened it. The first pages showed a younger Anthony, smiling and full of life. There were pictures of him on trips, in business meetings, and in moments of leisure. But it was one photo in particular that made Emily's heart skip a beat. Anthony, clearly younger, holding a newborn baby in his arms. The joy on his face was palpable. Turning the page, Emily found more photos of the child growing up. First birthday, first steps, first day of school. There was no doubt. This was the young woman who had appeared that morning, the daughter Victoria wanted to keep hidden. On the back of one of the photos, Emily found an inscription: "My dear Beatrice, my greatest treasure. May the future hold all the happiness in the world for you. With love, Dad." The discovery left Emily stunned. What other secrets did this family hold, and how did it affect Anthony's current state? As she carefully placed the album back in its place, Emily made a silent promise to her patient. She would uncover the truth no matter the cost. Anthony Whitaker deserved more than to be a shadow in his own life, and she would do everything in her power to bring light to this dark situation. The day was coming to an end, but for Emily, it felt like a new journey was just beginning. With the mysterious key in her pocket and the new information in her mind, she knew the coming days would be crucial. The truth was out there waiting to be discovered, and she was determined to uncover it. The days that followed were a mix of routine and tension for Emily. She continued her diligent care of Anthony, but now every gesture was permeated by a growing curiosity and a silent determination to unravel the mysteries surrounding the Whitaker family. A week after the incident with Beatrice, Anthony's supposed daughter, Emily arrived at the mansion to find an atmosphere even more charged than usual. Victoria moved through the halls like a contained storm, casting suspicious glances at every staff member who crossed her path. Upon entering Anthony's room, Emily was surprised by an unexpected scene. Victoria was standing by the bed, holding what appeared to be a folder of documents. Her face was twisted in an expression of anger and fear. "Ah, you're here," Victoria said, quickly composing herself upon seeing Emily. "I need you to double your vigilance over Anthony. Do not allow anyone into this room without my explicit permission, understood?" Emily nodded, keeping her expression neutral. "Of course, Mrs. Whittaker. May I ask if there's a specific reason for this extra precaution?" Veronica hesitated for a moment, her gaze shifting between Emily and her motionless husband. "Just legal matters. Nothing you need to worry about." With those cryptic words, Veronica left the room, leaving behind a trail of expensive perfume and unanswered questions. Emily approached Anthony, watching him closely. "What's going on here, Mr. Whittaker? What is your wife hiding?" As she went about her morning routine, Emily's mind raced furiously. The mysterious key, the secret daughter, and now these legal matters mentioned by Veronica. Everything seemed connected somehow, but the puzzle pieces still didn't fit. Determined to find more clues, Emily began paying even closer attention to the details around her. It was while changing the sheets that she noticed something, a small tear in the mattress, almost imperceptible, but large enough to hide something. With her heart pounding, she slid her fingers into the tear, feeling something rigid inside. Quickly glancing at the door to make sure she was alone, Emily pulled out the hidden object. It was a yellowed envelope, clearly old. With trembling hands, she opened it, revealing a series of legal documents. As she read, her eyes widened in shock. The papers detailed the creation of a trust fund in Beatrice Whittaker's name with an astronomical sum of money. Even more shocking, there was a clause stipulating that in the event of Anthony's incapacity, the management of the fund would pass directly to Beatrice, completely excluding Veronica from the process. "My God," Emily whispered, the reality of the situation beginning to take shape in her mind. Veronica wasn't just trying to hide the existence of a stepdaughter. She was potentially losing control over a fortune. Suddenly, a noise at the door made Emily jump. Quickly, she placed the documents back in the envelope and hid it in the mattress again, her heart racing. Mrs. Eugenia entered the room, carrying a tray with Emily's lunch. The housekeeper seemed to notice the nurse's agitation but made no comment. "Is everything all right, Miss Thompson?" asked Mrs. Eugenia, placing the tray on a side table. Emily forced a smile, trying to steady her breathing. Yes, just concerned about some adjustments to Mr. Whittaker's equipment." Mrs. Eugenia nodded, but her gaze remained piercing. "You know, Miss Thompson, I've worked in this house for over 2 decades. I've seen many things, heard many secrets. If you need someone to talk to..." The offer hung in the air, full of possibilities. Emily hesitated, weighing her next steps. Could she trust Mrs. Eugenia, or was the housekeeper's loyalty to the Whittakers? Before she could make a decision, a commotion in the hallway caught both their attention. Veronica's raised voice echoed through the walls, followed by another voice Emily recognized immediately. "Beatrice." "You can't keep me from seeing him," shouted Beatrice. "He's my father. He's my husband, and this is my house," Veronica shot back. "You have no rights here." The sound of hurried footsteps approached the room. Mrs. Eugenia cast a worried glance at Emily before positioning herself near the door as if to block an imminent intrusion. Emily, in turn, stood protectively by Anthony's bedside, her eyes fixed on her patient's face, and for a brief moment, she could have sworn she saw a single tear roll down the corner of his eye. The door burst open violently, revealing Beatrice, her eyes red from crying and filled with determination, closely followed by a furious Veronica. "Dad!" exclaimed Beatrice, running toward the bed. Victoria tried to intercept her, but Emily, acting on instinct, stepped between the two women. "Please," said Emily, her voice firm but gentle, "remember that we are in a patient's room. Any stress could be harmful to Mr. Whittaker." The words seemed to have a momentary calming effect. Beatrice stopped, her hands trembling at her sides, while Victoria took a step back, composing herself. "Miss Thompson is right," said Mrs. Eugenia, her voice carrying surprising authority. "Perhaps it would be best to continue this discussion elsewhere." Victoria shot one last furious glance at Beatrice before turning to leave. "This conversation isn't over," she hissed. Beatrice, however, remained where she was, her eyes fixed on her father. Can I stay with him for a moment?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Emily looked at Mrs. Eugenia, who nodded almost imperceptibly. 5 minutes, said the nurse, feeling she was doing the right thing. As Beatrice approached the bed, gently holding her father's hand, Emily couldn't help but notice the resemblance between the two. The same face shape, the same determined chin. There was no doubt they were father and daughter. "Daddy," Beatrice spoke softly, "I'm here. I won't give up on you, I promise." Emily felt a lump in her throat, moved by the scene, but her mind kept working, connecting the dots between the hidden trust fund, Victoria's hostility, and Beatrice's determination. As she watched the interaction between father and daughter, Emily knew she had made a decision. She could no longer be just a passive observer in this family drama. Somehow, she needed to uncover the whole truth, for Anthony's sake, for Beatrice's, and perhaps for justice itself. The 4th day at the Whittaker mansion had ended, but the real battle was just beginning. Emily knew the coming days would be crucial, and she was determined to face whatever lay ahead. The dawn of the 5th day brought with it a renewed determination for Emily. After the tumultuous events of the previous day, she knew she could no longer remain a mere spectator to the dramas unfolding in the Whittaker mansion. Upon arriving, Emily immediately noticed a change in the atmosphere of the house. There was a palpable tension in the air, as if all the inhabitants were walking on eggshells. Mrs. Eugenia greeted her with a worried look. "Miss Thompson," whispered the housekeeper, pulling Emily into a discreet corner of the entrance hall. "Be careful today. Mrs. Whittaker is volatile." Emily nodded, grateful for the warning. "Thank you, Mrs. Eugenia. Is there anything else I should know?" The housekeeper hesitated for a moment, looking around as if afraid of being overheard. "Just stay alert. The walls have ears in this house." With those cryptic words, Mrs. Eugenia walked away, leaving Emily with even more questions than answers. Upon entering Anthony's room, Emily was surprised by an unexpected scene. Victoria was standing by the bed, impeccably dressed as always, but her face betrayed signs of a sleepless night. "Ah, you're here," said Victoria, her voice tense. "I need you to do something for me, Miss Thompson." Emily kept her expression neutral, waiting for Victoria to continue. "I want you to keep a detailed record of all the visits Anthony receives, exact times of arrival and departure, names, what was said, everything." The nurse frowned, confused. "Mrs. Whittaker, this isn't something that typically falls under my duties as a nurse." "I'm paying you to take care of my husband," Victoria interrupted sharply. "That includes protecting him from unwanted influences." Emily could feel the weight of Victoria's gaze on her, assessing her reaction. Carefully, she chose her next words. "I understand your concern, Mrs. Whittaker. I'll do my best to keep Mr. Anthony safe and comfortable, as always. As for detailed records of visits, I can note basic information for medical purposes, but I can't promise to monitor private conversations." Victoria narrowed her eyes, clearly dissatisfied with the response, but before she could argue, the sound of footsteps in the hallway caught her attention. Dr. Mendez entered the room, his expression serious. "Good morning, ladies. Mrs. Whittaker, may we speak privately for a moment?" Victoria shot one last piercing look at Emily before following the doctor out of the room. The door closed behind them, but Emily could hear the low murmur of a tense conversation on the other side. Taking advantage of the moment of privacy, Emily approached Anthony. "Good morning, Mr. Whittaker," she said softly. "It looks like we have another busy day ahead." As she performed the morning care routine, Emily couldn't help but notice a subtle tension in Anthony's facial muscles. It was almost imperceptible, but to someone who spent hours observing him daily, the change was clear. "Mr. Whittaker," she whispered, leaning closer, "I know you can hear me. I'm not entirely sure what's going on here, but I promise I'll do everything I can to help you and your daughter." For a brief moment, Emily could have sworn she saw Anthony's fingers twitch slightly. Her heart raced at the possibility of a conscious response. The door opened abruptly, interrupting the moment. Victoria entered, followed by Dr. Mendez. The woman's expression was a mix of triumph and anxiety. "Miss Thompson," said Dr. Mendez, his voice carefully neutral, "Mrs. Whittaker and I have discussed some changes to Mr. Anthony's treatment. We'd like to start a new series of tests and possibly consider a transfer to a specialized clinic. Emily felt an alarm go off in her mind. Something wasn't right. "Doctor," she began, choosing her words carefully, "you mentioned last week that Mr. Whitaker was making progress, however subtle. Could such a drastic change be harmful at this stage?" Victoria interjected before the doctor could respond. "Decisions about my husband's treatment are mine to make, Miss Thompson. Your role is to care for him, not to question medical directives." Emily could feel the tension rising in the room. She looked at Dr. Mendez, searching for some sign that he shared her concerns, but the doctor's face remained impassive. "I understand," Emily said finally. "May I at least suggest we wait a few days before making any drastic changes? That would give us time to properly prepare Mr. Whitaker, Albuquerque, and ensure a smooth transition." Victoria seemed about to protest, but Dr. Mendez nodded slowly. "That seems reasonable. We can start the preparations today and begin the new procedures next week." With one last warning glance at Emily, Victoria left the room, followed by the doctor. As soon as the door closed, Emily turned to Anthony, her mind racing furiously. She knew she had to act fast. Whatever Victoria was planning, it didn't seem to be in Anthony's best interest. Emily needed to find a way to communicate with Beatrice, to warn her about the transfer plans. As she adjusted the equipment around the bed, Emily felt something brush her hand. Looking down, she saw Anthony's fingers move slightly, as if trying to reach her. "Mr. Whitaker?" she whispered, leaning closer. "Can you hear me? If you can, try to move your fingers again." For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, Anthony's fingers curled. Emily's heart leapt. It wasn't her imagination. Anthony was responding consciously. "My God," she breathed, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. "Mr. Whitaker, I'm going to help you, I promise. But I need you to keep fighting, okay? Don't give up." With renewed determination, Emily knew she had to speed up her plans. She needed to find out more about the trust fund, about Victoria's true motives, and find a way to protect Anthony and Beatrice. The 5th day at the Whitaker mansion was just beginning, but Emily knew it would be a turning point. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, and she was determined to uncover the truth no matter the cost. The rest of the day passed in a state of contained tension for Emily. The discovery that Anthony was conscious and able to communicate, even minimally, changed everything. She knew she needed to act cautiously but also urgently. As she carried out her routine tasks, Emily kept a watchful eye out for any opportunity to investigate further. It was during a shift change of the security guards that she saw her chance. Seizing a moment when the hallway was empty, Emily slipped out of Anthony's room and quickly made her way to Victoria's office. Her heart pounded furiously as she turned the doorknob, praying it was unlocked. To her surprise and relief, the door opened without resistance. Emily stepped inside quickly, closing it behind her. The office was a blend of elegance and power, with bookshelves lining the walls and the imposing mahogany desk at the center. With trembling hands, Emily began rummaging through the desk drawers, searching for anything that could shed light on Victoria's plans. It was in the 3rd drawer that she found something promising, a folder labeled Project Phoenix. Opening it, Emily was met with a series of legal and financial documents. Her eyes scanned the pages, absorbing information that made her stomach churn. Project Phoenix was an elaborate plan to transfer the majority of Anthony's assets to a series of offshore accounts, effectively leaving Beatrice without her inheritance. Even more alarming, there were mentions of experimental treatments that, reading between the lines, seemed more like a way to keep Anthony incapacitated than to cure him. Emily was so engrossed in reading that she almost didn't hear the footsteps approaching in the hallway. In a panic, she quickly snapped photos of the documents with her phone before putting everything back in place and slipping out of the office as quietly as possible. She had barely turned the corner when she saw Victoria entering the office, accompanied by a man Emily didn't recognize. Pressing herself against the wall, she tried to listen in on the conversation. "Needs to be done this week, Roberto." Victoria's voice reached her. "We can't risk that brat interfering again." "What about the nurse?" the male voice replied. "She seems too curious for my taste." There was a pause before Victoria responded, her voice dripping with disdain. "She's just an immigrant, with no connections. If she causes trouble, we can easily get rid of her." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. The situation was even more dangerous than she had imagined. Quickly returning to Anthony's room, Emily found her patient as she had left him, but now she saw him with new eyes. Approaching the bed, she spoke in a low voice. "Mr. Whitaker, I've discovered something. Your wife, she's planning something terrible. I need to find a way to contact your daughter, Beatrice. Do you know of any way I can reach her?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, Anthony's eyes moved toward the nightstand. Emily followed his gaze and noticed a small address book partially hidden under some papers. With trembling hands, she picked it up and began flipping through it. Under the letter B, she found what she was looking for. Beatrice, emergencies. Followed by a phone number. Emily quickly typed the number into her phone, saving it under a code name. She knew she had to be extremely careful from now on. "Thank you," she whispered to Anthony. "I'll do everything I can to protect you and your daughter." The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety and silent planning. Emily knew she needed to find a way to communicate with Beatrice without raising suspicions. She also needed to document everything she had discovered in case something happened to her. When her shift finally ended, Emily left the mansion feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. She knew the next 24 hours would be crucial. Arriving at her small apartment, Emily immediately began transcribing everything she had uncovered, including the photos she had taken of the documents. She created digital and physical copies, hiding them in different places. Then, gathering all her courage, she picked up the phone and typed a message to Beatrice's number. "Beatrice, my name is Emily. I'm your father's nurse. I've discovered important information about his situation. We need to talk urgently, but it must be in absolute secrecy. Please meet me tomorrow at 3 p.m. in Central Park, near the Statue of Liberty. Come alone and don't tell anyone. Your father's life may depend on it." With a racing heart, Emily sent the message. Now, all she could do was wait and hope that Beatrice would respond. Lying in bed that night, unable to sleep, Emily reflected on how her life had changed drastically in just 6 days. She had come to the United States seeking a fresh start, a chance to make a difference. Now, she found herself in the middle of a plot worthy of a thriller, with real lives at stake. As the clock ticked through the early hours of the morning, Emily made a silent promise to herself and to Anthony. She would go to the ends of the earth to uncover the truth and protect those who couldn't protect themselves. No matter the personal cost, she would do what was right. The 6th day had ended, but Emily knew the real test was yet to come. With this determination in mind, she finally fell into a restless sleep, dreaming of mysterious keys, secret documents, and the pleading eyes of a man trapped in his own body. The 7th day dawned with a mix of apprehension and determination for Emily. She had slept little, her mind filled with worries and plans. As she prepared for another day at the Whitaker mansion, she checked her phone for the 1,000th time, anxious for a response from Beatrice. Still nothing. Arriving at the mansion, Emily was immediately struck by a different atmosphere. There was an unusual bustle, with staff whispering among themselves and casting nervous glances in her direction. Mrs. Eugenia intercepted her in the hallway, her face a mask of concern. "Miss Thompson," she whispered, "be very careful today. Something is happening, and it's not good." Emily nodded, grateful for the warning. "Thank you, Mrs. Eugenia. Do you know anything specific?" The housekeeper looked around before answering in a low voice. "I heard Mrs. Whitaker talking about a transfer. Today." Emily's heart froze. They were speeding up the plan. She needed to act fast. Entering Anthony's room, Emily found Victoria already there, accompanied by Dr. Mendez and 2 men she didn't recognize, likely from the transfer team. "Ah, Miss Thompson," said Victoria, her tone falsely sweet. "So glad you're here. We're preparing to transfer Anthony to a specialized clinic. Your services will no longer be needed after today." Emily kept her expression neutral, though her heart was racing. "I see. May I ask which clinic Mr. Whitaker is being transferred to? I'd like to provide a detailed report of the care I've been giving." Dr. Mendez seemed to hesitate, but Victoria quickly replied, "That won't be necessary. The new team will have all the information they need." Emily knew she was treading dangerous ground, but she couldn't stay silent. "With all due respect, Mrs. Whitaker, as the nurse responsible for Mr. Anthony, I have an ethical duty to ensure the continuity of his care. Without proper information about the transfer, I fear there could be risks to his health." Dr. Mendez looked momentarily uncomfortable, but Victoria cut him off before he could speak. "Your concern is noted, Miss Thompson, but unnecessary. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have preparations to make." At that moment, Emily's phone vibrated in her pocket. Discreetly, she glanced at the screen and saw a message from an unknown number. "I'll be there, B." With a mix of relief and renewed anxiety, Emily knew she needed to buy time. She approached Anthony's bed, pretending to check his vitals. "Mr. Whitaker," she whispered, so softly only he could hear. "Don't worry. I'm doing everything I can to help. Your daughter is on her way." For a brief moment, Emily saw Anthony's eyes shift toward her, a flicker of understanding passing through them. Turning back to Victoria and the team, Emily said aloud, "Mrs. Whitaker, I've noticed some fluctuations in Mr. Anthony's vitals. I think it would be prudent to delay the transfer for at least a few hours to ensure he's stable." Dr. Mendez frowned, stepping closer to check the monitors. You may be right, Miss Thompson. Perhaps we should—" "Nonsense," Victoria interrupted. "We've delayed this long enough. The transfer will happen now and it's final." Emily felt panic rising within her. She needed more time but was running out of options. Then a desperate idea struck her. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said, keeping her voice steady, "before we proceed, with the transfer there's something I need to show you and Dr. Mendez in private." Victoria looked at her suspiciously, but curiosity won out. "Very well. Dr. Mendez, come with us. You two," she addressed the men from the transfer team, "wait here and prepare everything." In the hallway, away from prying ears, Emily took a deep breath before speaking. "Mrs. Whitaker, Dr. Mendez, I have reason to believe that Mr. Anthony is conscious and capable of communication." The reaction was immediate. Victoria visibly paled while Dr. Mendez widened his eyes in surprise. "What are you talking about?" Victoria hissed. Emily continued, knowing she was playing her last card. "Over the past few days, I've noticed consistent responses to stimuli. Eye movements, small finger movements. I believe he might be trapped in a locked-in syndrome, not in a vegetative state." Dr. Mendez seemed genuinely intrigued. That would be extraordinary. We need to investigate immediately." Victoria, however, didn't seem convinced. "This is ridiculous. You're just trying to delay things." "If I'm wrong," Emily argued, "then a few hours of testing won't make a difference. But if I'm right, we'd be making a terrible mistake by transferring him without proper evaluation." There was a tense moment of silence. Emily could see the gears turning in Victoria's mind, weighing her options. Finally, Dr. Mendez spoke. "Mrs. Whitaker, as the attending physician, I cannot, in good conscience, proceed with the transfer without investigating these claims. I suggest we conduct some basic tests immediately." Victoria seemed furious but was cornered. With a curt nod, she agreed. Back in the room, Emily watched anxiously as Dr. Mendez performed a series of response tests on Anthony. Time seemed to drag, each minute an eternity as she waited, praying her intuition was right and that Beatrice would arrive in time. As the doctor worked, Emily couldn't help but notice Victoria's calculating gaze. She knew she had bought some time, but had also placed herself directly in the path of the woman's plans. The game had changed, and the stakes had never been higher. The 7th day at the Whitaker mansion was far from over, and Emily knew the next few hours would be crucial. With Beatrice on her way and the truth about to come to light, she could only hope she had done enough to protect Anthony and expose Victoria's plan. With her heart racing and nerves on edge, Emily prepared for what promised to be the most important confrontation of her life. The tension in the room was palpable as Dr. Mendez continued his tests on Anthony. Emily observed attentively, dividing her attention between the subtle reactions of her patient and Victoria's increasingly pale face. "Incredible," murmured Dr. Mendez after a series of stimuli. There is definitely a response pattern here. Mr. Whitaker, if you can understand me, please blink twice. The silence that followed seemed eternal. Then slowly, deliberately, Anthony blinked twice. Emily felt a wave of relief and emotion rush through her body. She wasn't wrong. Anthony was indeed conscious. Dr. Mendez turned to Victoria, his face a mix of professional excitement and concern. Mrs. Whitaker, this changes everything. Your husband is not in a vegetative state, but possibly suffering from locked-in syndrome. We need to cancel the transfer immediately and start a new treatment protocol. Victoria looked as if she had seen a ghost. Her mask of control was visibly crumbling. This is impossible. There must be some mistake. There is no mistake, insisted Dr. Mendez. The signs are clear. We need to... At that moment, the door to the room swung open abruptly. Beatrice entered, breathless and wide-eyed. "Dad!" she exclaimed, rushing to the bedside. Beatrice's arrival seemed to unleash chaos. Victoria shouted for the security guards, ordering them to remove the intruder. Emily stepped protectively between Beatrice and the advancing men. "Stop!" Dr. Mendez's voice thundered, startling everyone with its authority. "No one is removing anyone. We have a delicate medical situation here, and I need everyone to calm down." Seizing the moment of confusion, Emily leaned toward Beatrice, whispering, "Quickly, your father is conscious. He can communicate through blinks. 2 for yes, 1 for no." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears as she turned to her father. "Dad, can you hear me? Do you know who I am?" Slowly, deliberately, Anthony blinked twice. The room fell into absolute silence for a moment, everyone absorbing the magnitude of what was happening. Victoria was the first to recover, her face twisted into a mask of fury. "This is some kind of trick. You're all conspiring against me." "Mrs. Whitaker," Dr. Mendez tried to calm her. "No one is conspiring. This is a significant medical discovery. We need to—" "No! Victoria!" Victoria shouted. "You don't understand. He can't be conscious. Not after everything." Her voice faltered, and for a moment, Emily saw what appeared to be genuine fear in Victoria's eyes. Beatrice, who had been focused on her father, turned to face her stepmother. "What do you mean by after everything? What did you do?" The tension in the room was palpable. Emily knew they were on the brink of a crucial revelation. She discreetly moved to block the door, preventing any attempt by Victoria to escape. I only did what was necessary," Victoria began to stammer, her composure finally crumbling. "You don't understand. He was going to leave me with nothing. All that money for a daughter he barely knew." The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place in Emily's mind. The trust fund, the documents she had found. It all made sense now. "You sabotaged his treatment," Emily accused, her voice trembling with indignation. "You kept him sedated, prevented his recovery, all to maintain control over the money." Victoria didn't deny it. Her silence was a more eloquent confession than any words could be. Dr. Mendez looked horrified. "My God, I had no idea. All those reports, those treatment recommendations, were they falsified?" Beatrice, tears streaming down her face, turned to her father. "Dad, is it true? Did she do this to you?" 2 slow blinks. "Yes, What followed was a whirlwind of emotions and actions. Beatrice, consumed by anger, lunged at Victoria, only to be restrained by Emily's quick intervention. Dr. Mendez, recovering from the shock, began making frantic calls, summoning specialists and alerting the authorities. Victoria, seeing her empire of lies crumble, made one last desperate attempt to escape. But Emily, anticipating the move, blocked her path. "It's over, Mrs. Whitaker," Emily said, her voice firm. "The truth has come out." When the police finally arrived, they found a surreal scene. Victoria Whitaker, the powerful socialite, sitting defeated in a corner, Beatrice holding her father's hand, tears of relief and anger mixed on her face, and Emily, the immigrant nurse, standing like a sentinel, protecting her patient to the end. The 8th day at the Whitaker mansion had been a turning point. Secrets had been revealed, lies unmasked, and a shattered family began the long process of healing. As Victoria was taken away for questioning and a specialized medical team arrived to assess Anthony, Emily allowed herself a moment of reflection. She had come to the United States in search of a new beginning, a chance to make a difference. She could never have imagined that difference would be so profound, so transformative. Looking at Anthony, who was now receiving the proper medical attention he deserved, and at Beatrice, who finally had the chance to reconnect with her father, Emily felt a mix of exhaustion and fulfillment. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but for the first time in a long while, there was real hope in the air. The sun began to set over New York, marking the end of a day that would forever change the lives of everyone involved. And at the center of it all was a Portuguese nurse who refused to stay silent in the face of injustice, proving that sometimes the most unlikely heroes can make the biggest difference. The days following the revelation were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. The Whitaker mansion, once a monument to opulence and secrets, became the epicenter of a police investigation and a medical revolution. Emily, exhausted but determined, continued her tireless work, now with the full support of a team of specialists. Dr. Mendez, deeply shaken by his unwitting complicity in Victoria's scheme, devoted himself entirely to Anthony's recovery, working day and night to reverse the damage caused by years of intentional neglect. Beatrice, in turn, became a constant presence by her father's side. The young woman, who had once fought only for the right to see Anthony, now found herself at the center of a legal battle to protect not just her family's legacy, but also her father's future. It was on a particularly hectic afternoon, about a week after the revelation, that Emily noticed something different about Anthony. She was adjusting his pillows when she detected a subtle movement in his right hand. "Mr. Whitaker," she called softly, her heart racing. "Can you move your hand again for me?" Slowly, with visible effort, Anthony's fingers curled slightly. Emily could barely contain her excitement. "Dr. Mendez," she called. "Come quickly." The doctor hurried into the room, closely followed by Beatrice. Together they watched in awe as Anthony, with fierce determination in his eyes, moved his fingers repeatedly. "This is extraordinary," murmured Dr. Mendez, his voice choked with emotion. "Mr. Whitaker, you're making incredible progress." Beatrice, tears in her eyes, held her father's hand. "You're coming back to us, Dad. Keep fighting." In the days that followed, Anthony's progress was slow but steady. With each small victory, an additional movement, clearer communication through blinks, hope grew. Emily, always attentive, began developing a more elaborate communication system. With Anthony, using a letter chart he could select from with eye movements. It was through this system that a week later, Anthony formed his first complete message. "Thank you, Emily." The emotion that filled the room at that moment was indescribable. Emily, usually so composed, couldn't hold back her tears. "You're welcome, Mr. Whitaker," she replied, her voice trembling. "We're all here for you." As Anthony regained more control over his body, the investigation into Victoria's actions deepened. The police uncovered a complex web of financial fraud, medical manipulation, and even attempts to bribe hospital staff. Beatrice, with the help of a team of lawyers, worked tirelessly to dismantle Victoria's scheme and protect the family's assets. It was during one of these legal meetings that Emily was called to testify. Sitting before a group of lawyers and investigators, Emily recounted everything she had observed and discovered during her time at the mansion. Her voice trembled slightly as she described the moment she found the secret documents in Victoria's office, but her determination remained unshaken. "I knew I was risking my job, maybe even more," she concluded, "but I couldn't stand by and watch such a great injustice happen." The lead lawyer nodded gravely. "Miss Thompson, your courage and integrity are admirable. Thanks to your testimony and the evidence you gathered, we have a strong case against Victoria Whitaker." As the investigation continued, life at the mansion slowly found a new rhythm. Anthony, now able to communicate more effectively, began reconnecting with his daughter and making decisions about his treatment and business affairs. One afternoon, as Emily was helping Anthony with his physical therapy exercises, he surprised her with a question through the communication system. "Why did you do all this?" Emily paused, reflecting on the question. "Because it was the right thing to do," she replied simply. "Because every life has value and deserves dignity." Anthony watched her for a long moment before forming his next message. "You changed everything. Thank you." Those simple words carried the weight of a gratitude that went beyond any verbal expression. Emily felt a wave of emotion wash over her, reaffirming her conviction that she had made the right choice, no matter the risks. As the 9th day turned into the 10th and then the 11th, the story of the immigrant nurse who unraveled a conspiracy and saved a tycoon began to spread. Journalists started appearing at the mansion gates, eager for an interview or a statement. Emily, true to her discreet nature, avoided the spotlight, preferring to focus on the well-being of her patient. But she couldn't deny the impact her actions had, not just on the lives of the Whitakers, but potentially on the entire healthcare and legal systems. One evening, as she watched the sunset from the balcony of the mansion, Emily reflected on the incredible journey she had lived through in recent weeks. She had come to the United States in search of a new life, a chance to make a difference. What she found was a battle for justice, a fight for human dignity, and an opportunity to truly change lives. The road ahead was still long. Anthony had a lengthy recovery process ahead. Beatrice was just beginning to rebuild her relationship with her father, and the legal ramifications of the case promised to stretch on for months, if not years. But in that moment, watching the vibrant colors of the New York sky, Emily felt a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. She had made a difference. She had stayed true to her principles, even in the face of danger and adversity. With a gentle smile, Emily turned to return to Anthony's room. The day wasn't over yet and there was work to be done. But now every step, every act of care, carried with it the certainty that sometimes a single act of courage can set off a wave of change that extends far beyond what we can imagine. Weeks turned into months, and life at the Whitaker mansion continued to evolve in ways no one could have predicted. The case against Victoria was slowly making its way through the judicial system, with new revelations emerging almost daily. Meanwhile, Anthony was making steady progress in his recovery, surpassing his doctor's expectations at every turn. Emily, now a central figure in the Whitakers' lives, found herself navigating new territory, both professionally and personally. Her role had expanded far beyond that of a simple nurse. She was now a confidant, an advisor, and in many ways, the glue holding the family together during this tumultuous period. One sunny morning, about 3 months after the initial revelation, Emily entered Anthony's room to find him sitting up in bed, a faint but genuine smile on his face. "Good morning, Mr. Whitaker," she greeted, immediately noticing the change in his posture. "It seems like today is a good day." Anthony nodded slowly, his movements still limited but visibly more controlled than in previous weeks. With effort, he raised his right hand and pointed to the chair beside the bed, indicating that he wanted Emily to sit. Intrigued, she obliged. Anthony then turned to the tablet on his lap, a tool they had recently introduced to aid in his communication. With slow but deliberate movements, he began to type. "Emily," the computerized voice read, "I need to tell you something important." She leaned forward, attentive. "Of course, Mr. Whitaker. What is it?" Anthony continued typing, his brow furrowed, in concentration. "All this time, while I was trapped in my own body, I could hear and understand everything, even Victoria's conversations." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. You knew what she was doing?" He nodded gravely before typing again. "I knew everything, her betrayal, her plans, her greed, but the worst was knowing that my daughter was out there wanting to see me, and I couldn't do anything." Tears began to form in Emily's eyes. The thought of the torment Anthony must have endured, aware but unable to communicate, was almost unbearable. "But you," Anthony continued, his eyes fixed on Emily, "you changed everything. You were the first to truly see me, to believe that I was still here." Emily swallowed hard, moved. "I just did what any decent person would do, Mr. Whitaker." He shook his head, determined to continue. "No, you did much more. You risked everything for me, for Beatrice. You gave us a second chance." There was a pause as Anthony gathered his strength to keep typing. "That's why I've made a decision. I want you to officially become part of the Whitaker team, not just as a nurse, but as an advisor and, if you accept, as part of the family. Emily was speechless, completely caught off guard. "Mr. Whitaker, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," came the simple reply through the tablet. "You're already family to us, Emily. Now it's just about making it official." At that moment, Beatrice entered the room, smiling as she saw her father and Emily together. "What's going on here?" she asked, noticing the emotional atmosphere. Anthony gestured for his daughter to come closer, and together they explained the proposal to Beatrice. To Emily's surprise and joy, Beatrice embraced the idea with enthusiasm. "Emily, you saved our lives," Beatrice said, holding the nurse's hands. "It would be an honor to have you officially as part of the family." Overwhelmed with emotion, Emily finally nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I accept." The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Lawyers were called in to formalize Emily's position in the Whitaker company and to establish her new role in the family. The news spread quickly, and soon the story of the immigrant nurse who became part of one of the most powerful families in the United States was in all the newspapers. But for Emily, the real change was in the small moments, in the laughter shared with Beatrice as they planned the next phase of Anthony's recovery, in the grateful looks Anthony gave her with each new progress, in the sense of belonging she felt every time she entered the mansion, no longer as an employee but as family. One evening, about a week after Anthony's proposal, Emily found herself on the mansion's balcony, watching the sunset over New York. Beatrice joined her, offering a glass of wine. "What are you thinking about?" Beatrice asked softly. Emily smiled, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "About how life can change so drastically in such a short time. A few months ago, I was just a newly arrived nurse in the United States, trying to build a new life. Now you're a heroine," Beatrice finished. "A savior, family." Emily turned to the young woman, moved. "You've given me so much more than I could have ever imagined. A purpose, a home. And we gained a sister," Beatrice replied, hugging Emily. "A sister who brought us back to life." The following months brought a series of changes and challenges for the newly expanded Whitaker family. The legal proceedings against Victoria continued, with hearings and testimonies keeping everyone on constant alert. Emily, now officially part of the family and the executive team of the Whitaker Company, found herself dividing her time between caring for Anthony, business meetings, and sessions with lawyers. One particularly hectic morning, Emily entered Anthony's office to find him sitting in his wheelchair, examining a stack of documents. His movements, though still limited, had improved significantly in recent weeks. "Good morning, Anthony," she greeted, still getting used to calling him by his first name. "How are you feeling today?" Anthony looked up, a tired but determined smile on his face. "Better every day, thanks to you and the medical team." His speech, though slow and slightly slurred, was now clearly understandable, a progress that filled everyone with hope. Emily approached, noticing the tension in his shoulders. "Is something bothering you?" Anthony sighed, pushing the papers toward her. "The lawyers have found more evidence of Victoria's manipulations. It seems she's been embezzling funds for years, long before my accident." Carolina examined the documents, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "This is shocking. But it also strengthens our case against her, doesn't it?" "Yes," Anthony agreed, "but it also means we'll have to conduct a full audit of all our companies. It's going to be a long and potentially painful process." At that moment, Beatrice entered the room, carrying a tray with breakfast. "Good morning, family," she smiled, but her smile faltered as she noticed the tense atmosphere. "What happened?" As Anthony explained the situation to Beatrice, Carolina observed the interaction between father and daughter. It was incredible to see how their relationship had blossomed over the past few months. The initial pain and resentment had given way to a strong and affectionate bond. "Don't worry," Beatrice said with determination after hearing the news. "We'll get through this together. Our family is stronger than any challenge Victoria might have created." Carolina felt a wave of pride and affection. Beatrice is right. We're a team now and we'll face this united. Anthony looked at the two women with evident gratitude in his eyes. What did I do to deserve you too? The rest of the day was dedicated to meetings with the legal and financial teams, planning the next steps of the audit, and preparing for the repercussions that would surely come. Carolina found herself immersed in a world of numbers and legal terms that, months ago, would have seemed completely foreign. That night, exhausted but determined, Carolina retreated to her quarters in the mansion, a space that still amazed her with its luxury and comfort. As she prepared for bed, her phone rang. It was a video call from her family in Portugal. "Hello, darling." Her mother's cheerful voice filled the room. "How are things in the United States?" Carolina smiled, feeling a pang of homesickness. "They're intense, Mom, but good, very good. We saw you in the news," her father chimed in, pride evident in his voice. "Our daughter, an international heroine." Carolina laughed, blushing slightly. "Don't exaggerate. I just did what was right." The conversation continued for a few minutes, with Carolina sharing what she could about recent developments, always careful not to reveal confidential information. When she hung up, she felt comforted and strengthened by the love and support of her family back home. Lying in bed, Carolina reflected on the contrast between her current life and the one she had left behind in Portugal. She had set out in search of new opportunities, a chance to make a difference. What she found had exceeded her wildest expectations. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. It was Beatrice. "Can I come in?" she asked gently. "Of course," Carolina replied, sitting up. Beatrice settled on the edge of the bed, a thoughtful look on her face. "I've been thinking, with all this audit and Victoria's trial situation, maybe it's time we do something positive, something that can really make a difference." Carolina tilted her head, intrigued. "What do you have in mind?" "A foundation," Beatrice explained, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "An organization dedicated to helping people in situations similar to Dad's, people with complex neurological conditions that are often neglected or misdiagnosed." Emily's heart swelled with pride and emotion. "Beatrice, this is a wonderful idea, and I want you to lead this with me," Beatrice continued. "Your experience as a nurse combined with everything you've done for our family, you would be perfect for this." Emily was speechless for a moment, overwhelmed by the trust and responsibility Beatrice was placing in her. I would be honored," she finally managed to say. The two women spent the next few hours discussing ideas, planning, and dreaming about the impact they could have. When Beatrice finally retired to her own room, Emily found herself energized despite her fatigue. Lying back down, staring at the ceiling of her luxurious room, Emily smiled. Life had presented her with unimaginable challenges, but also incredible opportunities. She had found not only a new family, but a greater purpose. Dawn brought a renewed energy to the Whitaker mansion. The idea of the foundation proposed by Beatrice had ignited a flame of hope and purpose in everyone, especially Emily. As she prepared for another busy day, she couldn't help but smile, thinking about how her life had transformed in just a few months. Breakfast that morning was a lively gathering. Anthony, sitting at the head of the table, seemed more vigorous than ever. Beatrice could barely contain her excitement as she discussed the initial plans for the foundation. "I thought we could call it the New Dawn Foundation," Beatrice explained, her eyes shining. "What do you think?" Emily nodded, moved. "It's perfect. It represents exactly what we want to achieve." Anthony smiled proudly. "You two are amazing. I can't wait to see what you'll accomplish." The discussion was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Mendez, who had come for Anthony's weekly checkup. As he entered the dining room, the doctor seemed particularly excited. "Good morning, everyone," he greeted. "Anthony, I have excellent news. The latest tests show a significant improvement in brain activity. I believe we're ready to start a new phase of rehabilitation." The news was met with joy by everyone. Emily, in particular, felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had been there from the beginning, seeing Anthony struggle to regain even the slightest control over his body. Now, seeing the progress he had made was nothing short of miraculous. After breakfast, as Anthony prepared for his session with Dr. Mendez, Emily and Beatrice retreated to the office to start working on the details of the foundation. "I've been thinking," Beatrice began, opening her laptop, "we could focus on three main areas: advanced research in neurology, support for families affected by complex neurological conditions, and public education about these conditions." Emily nodded, impressed by Beatrice's clarity of vision. "That's excellent. We could also consider a training program for healthcare professionals, focusing on early detection and specialized care." The hours flew by as the two worked, sketching out plans, researching similar organizations, and discussing potential partners and collaborators. The enthusiasm was palpable, and Emily once again marveled at the direction her life had taken. In the middle of the afternoon, they were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Mrs. Eugenia, the housekeeper, with a worried expression on her face. "Miss Beatrice, Emily," she said hesitantly, "there's something you need to see." The two followed Mrs. Eugenia to the living room, where the television was tuned to, a news channel. The headline made Emily's heart freeze: "Victoria Whittaker escapes house arrest." The reporter on the screen detailed how Victoria had bypassed the electronic monitoring system and disappeared overnight. Authorities suspected she had help from accomplices and might be trying to leave the country. "My God," Beatrice murmured, her voice trembling. "We need to tell Dad." Emily nodded, her mind already working through the implications of this new twist. "I'll speak with the security team. We need to reinforce protective measures immediately." The following hours were a whirlwind of activity. The police were called, the mansion's security was tightened, and an emergency meeting was convened with the legal team. Anthony, upon being informed, remained surprisingly calm. "She's desperate," he said, his voice steady despite the situation. "This only further proves her guilt. We won't let this stop us or scare us." Emily admired Anthony's strength. Even after everything he had been through, he refused to be a victim of circumstances. That night, with the mansion on high alert, Emily found herself on the balcony, gazing at the lights of New York. Beatrice joined her, offering a cup of tea. "How are you holding up?" Beatrice asked softly. Emily sighed. "Worried, to be honest, but also determined. We won't let Victoria destroy everything we've built." Beatrice nodded, a look of determination in her eyes. "You know, amidst all this chaos, I can't help but think how grateful I am to have you here, Emily. You've become so much more than a nurse or a friend. You're family." The words touched Emily deeply. "You're my family now too," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. "And family protects each other, no matter what." The two stood there for a moment, watching the city below, each lost in their own thoughts. The future was uncertain, with the threat of Victoria looming over them, but there was also a sense of purpose and unity that couldn't be shaken. "The foundation," Emily said suddenly. "We can't let this stop us from moving forward with our plans." Beatrice smiled, nodding vigorously. "You're absolutely right. In fact, this only makes our work even more important. We can turn this adversity into something positive." The days following Victoria's escape were a whirlwind of activity and conflicting emotions at the Whittaker mansion. The police came and went, interviewing staff and reinforcing security. The media, hungry for more details of the scandal, camped outside the property gates. Amidst all this chaos, Emily, Beatrice, and Anthony worked hard to maintain a sense of normalcy and focus on their goals. One morning, about a week after the escape, Emily entered Anthony's office to find him engrossed in a video conference. She waited patiently until he finished the call. "Good morning, Emily," Anthony greeted, a tired smile on his face. "Sorry about that. We were discussing the implications of Victoria's escape for our international business." Emily nodded, understanding. "How are things?" Anthony sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Complicated. Some partners are nervous, worried about the company's stability, but most are on our side, especially after we explained the full situation." "That's good to hear," Emily replied, sitting in the chair across from his desk. "And how are you feeling about all this?" Anthony was silent for a moment, his eyes distant. "It's strange, you know. Part of me is furious with Victoria, with everything she's done. But another part feels sorry for her, Emily tilted her head, surprised. Sorry? Yes, Anthony continued. I think about how much emptiness she must feel inside to do everything she did, to betray not just me but herself, her own values. Anthony's compassion touched Emily deeply. Even after everything he had been through, he could still see the humanity in his tormentor. At that moment, Beatrice walked into the office carrying a stack of papers. Good morning, family. I have news about the foundation. Anthony's face lit up instantly. Tell us, dear. Beatrice spread the documents on the table. Well, first, we managed to schedule meetings with 3 of the country's leading neurological research centers. They're very interested in our funding proposal. Emily examined the papers, impressed with the progress. That's fantastic, Beatrice. And there's more, Beatrice continued, her enthusiasm contagious. I received an email from an international association of families affected by rare neurological conditions. They want to collaborate with us, possibly even merge their operations. With our foundation. Anthony smiled, proud. You two are doing incredible work. I can't wait to see where this goes. The conversation continued, with the 3 of them discussing plans and possibilities for the new Dawn Foundation. For a moment, the threat of Victoria and the chaos of the past few days seemed distant. However, reality soon caught up with them. Anthony's phone rang, interrupting the discussion. He answered, his face turning serious as he listened. I understand, he said finally. Keep me updated on any developments. Hanging up the phone, Anthony looked at Emily and Beatrice with a grave expression. That was the lead investigator on Victoria's case. They have reason to believe she may have left the country. The silence that followed was heavy. Beatrice was the first to break it. What does that mean for us, for the case? Anthony sighed. It means things could get complicated. If she really managed to leave the United States, extradition could be a long and difficult process. Emily felt a wave of concern. What about your safety? If she's out of the country, does that reduce the immediate risk? Theoretically, yes, Anthony replied, but we can't let our guard down. Victoria has resources and connections. We don't know what she's capable of. The atmosphere in the office changed drastically. The enthusiasm from moments ago gave way to a palpable tension. Beatrice, however, refused to be discouraged. We can't let this paralyze us, she said firmly. We have important work to do. The foundation, the business. We can't stop our lives because of her. Emily nodded, feeling a surge of pride at Beatrice's determination. Beatrice is right. We need to keep moving forward, but with extra caution. Anthony looked at the 2 women with evident gratitude. What would I do without you two? He murmured. The rest of the day was dedicated to balancing the demands of business, the development of the foundation, and security concerns. Emily found herself alternating between meetings with Anthony's medical team, strategic discussions about the foundation, and briefings with the security team. That evening, exhausted but determined, Emily retreated to her quarters. As she prepared for bed, she couldn't help but reflect on how her life had become so complex and multifaceted in such a short time. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Beatrice. Can I come in? She asked hesitantly. Of course, Emily replied, gesturing for Beatrice to join her in the small sitting area attached to the bedroom. Beatrice sat down, suddenly appearing vulnerable. Emily, do you think we're doing the right thing with the foundation, with everything that's happening with Victoria? Emily took Beatrice's hand, squeezing it gently. Beatrice, what we're doing is more important than ever. Victoria has chosen a path of destruction. We are choosing to create, to help, to make a difference. There's nothing more right than that. The words seemed to calm Beatrice. She smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Thank you, Emily. I don't know what we'd do without you. The 2 sat there for a moment, sharing a comfortable silence. Emily once again marveled at the bonds she had formed with this family, at the role she now played in their lives. When Beatrice finally retreated to her own room, Emily sat on the edge of the bed, reflecting on the day. Dawn brought with it an atmosphere of renewed determination to the Whittaker mansion, despite the shadows that Victoria's escape cast over. Their lives, Emily, Beatrice, and Anthony, were more committed than ever to their goals. Emily woke up early, her mind already working on the plans for the day. As she got ready, she received a text from Dr. Mendez. Urgent meeting at 9 a.m. New developments in Anthony's case. With her heart racing, Emily hurried to breakfast, where she found Beatrice and Anthony already at the table, both with expressions of anticipation. "Did you both get the message from Dr. Mendez?" Emily asked, sitting down. Anthony nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Yes. He mentioned something about a new experimental treatment." Beatrice looked equally excited and apprehensive. "Do you think it could be something really promising, Dad?" "There's only one way to find out," Anthony replied, his voice steady despite the evident emotion. At 9 a.m. sharp, Dr. Mendez arrived, accompanied by a young doctor whom he introduced as Dr. Oliveira, a specialist in advanced neuro-rehabilitation. "Good morning, everyone," Dr. Mendez began, his tone mixing professionalism and enthusiasm. "We have exciting news. Dr. Oliveira is leading a pioneering study in deep brain stimulation for cases like Mr. Whitaker's." "Whitaker?" Dr. Oliveira took the floor, her eyes shining with passion for her work. "Our preliminary results have been extremely promising. We have managed to restore significant motor functions in patients with conditions similar to Mr. Whitaker's." Emily felt a wave of hope wash over her. "That's incredible! What are the risks involved?" The doctor explained the procedure in detail, its potential benefits, and the associated risks. It was an invasive treatment involving the implantation of electrodes in the brain, but the potential results were nothing short of revolutionary. Anthony listened attentively, asking insightful questions throughout the presentation. When Dr. Oliveira finished, he turned to Beatrice and Emily. "What do you think?" he asked, his voice calm but laden with emotion. Beatrice, with tears in her eyes, held her father's hand. "Dad, if there's a chance to improve your quality of life, I think we should seriously consider it." Emily nodded in agreement. "I agree with Beatrice. The risks are there, but the potential benefit seems to outweigh the dangers." Anthony took a deep breath, a determined smile forming on his face. "Well, then I think we have a decision. Dr. Oliveira, when can we start?" The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparations. Between preoperative exams, consultations with specialists, and adjustments to the mansion's routine, Emily barely had time to breathe. Yet, amidst all the chaos, she couldn't help but notice how the prospect of the new treatment had brought a renewed energy to everyone. Beatrice threw herself into the preparations for the New Dawn Foundation, determined to have everything ready for when her father recovered. "I want him to see the impact we're making," she confided to Emily one evening. "I want him to know that his legacy goes far beyond business." The eve of the surgery arrived faster than anyone expected. The mansion was quiet, an atmosphere of anticipation and apprehension hanging in the air. Emily found Anthony in his office, gazing thoughtfully out the window. "How are you feeling?" she asked softly, approaching him. Anthony turned, a serene smile on his face. "You know, Emily, I'm at peace. No matter what happens tomorrow, I know I've made the right choice."